अस्सलाम वालेकुम, आप देख रहे हैं मुबशर लुकमान यूट्यूब चैनल। मेरा नाम मुबशर लुकमान है और आज एक बहुत ही अहम शख्स का मैं इंटरव्यू आपके सामने लेके आ रहा हूँ। अगर आप की गहरी नज़र है तो आपको पता होगा कि आरिफ नकवी कौन है, अबराज ग्रुप कौन है। लेकिन अबराज ग्रुप और आरिफ नकवी के साथ लगता ही है कि शायद काफ़ी हाथ हो गया, उनके साथ कुछ ज़्यादती हो रही है। और ये पूरा लगता है कि जब अगर आप एक किताब पढ़ें जो अब मार्केट में आई है, जिसके ऑथर है ब्रिवाटी, और वो आज मेरे साथ स्काइप के ऊपर शरीक हैं। उनसे पूछते हैं कि उनका क्या मौक़िफ़ है आरिफ नकवी के बारे में, अबराज के बारे में। मुझे पढ़ के ये लगता है, ब्रायन की किताब ये पढ़ के लगता है कि उनके साथ बड़ी ज़्यादती हुई है। बट देखते हैं कि वो क्या कहते हैं। Brian, thank you very much for joining us, and I believe you're very busy, but anyway, thanks for joining us. I was just introducing about your book that is coming out on Arif Naqvi and Abraaj Group, and I haven't read the full book, but I've sort of flipped through it. Let me be honest with you at the outset, and from what I gather is that you've tried to ascertain that Mr. Naqvi is falsely implicated and being charged with the crimes that he has not committed. Is that right?
I think what's happened is that he has been accused and tried and convicted in the media, the Western media, of a series of crimes which are alleged by the Department of Justice. And in the West, it's been decided that he's guilty. And what my book tries to do is look at the facts objectively. And in my opinion, then there were certainly some problems with the firm. There were certainly some difficulties, but he is not guilty, in my view, of the things that he is accused of doing. And he's not the person who's been portrayed by the Murdoch press and by other books that are coming out on the subject.
So you're telling me that it is Murdoch press that is really after him, that they are being vindictive and not the other press in general. Is that right?
Well, if you look at the press coverage, overwhelmingly it's the Wall Street Journal that has pushed the Department of Justice line. And remember, you're in a situation here where the prosecution is feeding material to the media and the defense is silent. No one is really standing up for Arif Naqvi. Naqvi was a Pakistani nationalist, is a Pakistani nationalist through and through, and yet the Pakistani state is not defending him in any way. And it's been left to me to write what I hope is a balanced, objective, evidence-led book, which says there are huge question marks over the prosecution of this man. There are huge question marks over the caricature that has appeared in the Western media of his company, and we need to challenge that dominant narrative. Now, I'm talking to you, and we've had other articles appear in the Pakistani media. So far, not a single article has appeared in the Western media questioning this dominant narrative. And the book is being written, the attacking book against him has been written by Wall Street Journal journalists. It's being published by Murdoch-owned publishers, and it's being reviewed in Murdoch-owned newspapers. And on the other side, there is silence from Mr. Naqvi's legal team, but also silence from the Pakistani government.
There can be many reasons for that. I'm not the government of Pakistan, and neither am I their spokesperson. But one of the reasons is that Arif Naqvi has always been taken on or looked at as an American citizen of Pakistan who's been benevolent for Pakistan. Okay, I understand he invested over $150 million of his own personal money in Pakistan in various philanthropic projects. He was instrumental for the, he was a front guy for KESC, the Karachi Electric Supply Corporation. And he turned into a bad guy the moment he decided to sell that company over to Shanghai Group. And suddenly this all good American who was being quoted in America just before, this whole thing started. He was a member of many think tanks over there, and he was the American rags to riches story. And, he embodied the American dream story, and he was a perfect poster boy for that. And suddenly, with that Shanghai Group decision, everything went wrong with Arif Naqvi. Is that right?
Yes, I think that's right. But I think let me challenge that a little bit.
Okay.
He was a Western-oriented businessman, and his business, private equity, is a Western invention, an American invention. And he based his company in Dubai, registered in the Cayman Islands. But not only did he give $150 million of his own money to create institutions like the ambulance service in Karachi, for example, but he also did a huge amount of investing in Pakistan, creating funds that were specifically to create economic opportunity in Pakistan. So it's not an American rags to riches story, it's a Pakistani rags to riches story. And that's what I find very, very interesting, because if this had been an American citizen, as you put it, then surely, you know, the American state and American media would have got behind him potentially in this situation. And they haven't. And the Pakistani press has begun to now look at this afresh and say, well, hold on. This was a Pakistani out there in the world. He was making a very successful company. And then he decided, in the best interests of Karachi, to sell to the Chinese, Shanghai Electric, who had promised $9 billion of investment to continue improving the quality of Karachi Electric, which has gone downhill, I understand, over the last couple of years since this deal was first agreed. That deal was in the interests of the people of Karachi and Pakistan, but it was not, as you say, in the interests of the United States, because it gave China another economic stronghold within the context of Pakistan. And so, in my opinion, the Americans decided this deal has to be blocked. When that deal was blocked, that created an internal crisis in his company. And then there were a series of well-planned leaks to the press, which then created a crisis of confidence in him and his company, and it ultimately collapsed.
So it is a classical case of America first for the American government. You mean to say that Mr. Naqvi should have looked after the American interest rather than the Pakistani interest, and then he would have been spared?
100%. And remember, you know, the deal to sell Karachi Electric to the Chinese is announced in October 2016, and in November 2016, Donald Trump is elected president of the United States with record levels of donations from US private equity companies who'd been eyeing Abraaj and its network in emerging markets for many years. So not only was Mr. Naqvi challenging US foreign policy in terms of the trade war with China, he was also presenting a very choice morsel for US private equity and UK private equity companies to pick up cheaply if the company collapsed. And that's exactly what happened. In a way, what you need to look at is who benefits from the collapse of Abraaj and the assassination of Arif Naqvi's character. It's US and UK private equity companies who took over all the funds that he was running. And
but is it not right that he's actually being charged for embezzlement of over $14 billion from the Bill Gates Foundation and other companies owned by Bill and Melinda Gates? And it is that money that is actually in question, and the usage of that money and how he applied that towards different investments.
Well, let's be clear. There's no money missing from Abraaj. All investors
but it doesn't have the will of the lender to apply at a certain, in a certain business.
Well,
I mean, if I borrow money from you and I say I'm going to invest in the healthcare sector, but then I go and invest that into agriculture sector, I'm actually violating my contract with you.
Well, let's be clear. That's not what happened.
Okay.
So the Bill Gates Foundation put $100 million into the healthcare fund. There were delays in the investing of that fund in some hospitals that had planned to be invested in. When those delays were reaching the 90-day cutoff period, Abraaj returned all that money with interest to the Gates Foundation. But the Gates Foundation at that point actually was still locked in to investing with Abraaj, because that's the way private equity works. All investors in all Abraaj funds either had their money returned with interest, or their money is still invested in the companies that Abraaj invested in. And when the private equity firm sells, they'll get their money back with a profit. The lenders are in a slightly different character. So those who had lent money to Abraaj would have all been paid back if his restructuring plan in August 2018 had been accepted by some unsecured creditors who refused to accept it. So I'm sure mistakes were made. I'm not saying there were no mistakes made. And there is an argument about whether Abraaj used investors' funds correctly under what are called the limited partner agreements. Those are the legal contracts that the investors have with Abraaj of how the money is used. Their regulator, the competent authority in this, was the Dubai authority. They looked at it and they said, you are going to pay a fine, $300 million. And in the normal run of events, the firm would have challenged that and there would have been a big fight. Their own lawyers, Freshfields, told them everything they were doing was absolutely fine and above board. Deloitte told them everything they were doing was fine. KPMG told them everything they were doing was fine. So they might have won that, but they weren't allowed to, because then the DOJ indictment comes in with a very small number of investors who were American investors. But Bill Gates has not lost a penny in this process. He's made money.
Okay, but somehow or the other, the prosecutors in UK do not seem to agree with you, and they are pressing for a punishment which amounts to something like 350 years, if I'm not wrong. I mean, what has this guy done? Even the biggest of the terrorists don't get, this kind of punishment. This must be first of its kind in the 5,000-year-old history of mankind. What has this guy done, really?
Well, it's US prosecutors, not UK prosecutors.
Okay.
The UK is being asked to extradite him to the US to face these charges. And actually that tariff, as it's called, and it's 291 years, is not that unusual, because the way the American justice system works is by making deals. So they go after people with the maximum possible that they can charge someone with. And then you plea bargain, right? Even if you're innocent, it becomes in your interests to then say, well, actually, okay, if I don't have to go to jail, or if I only have to go to jail for a couple of years, I'm going to plead guilty. Now, everyone else who's been indicted, along with Arif Naqvi, has done those sorts of deals. That's just the way the American justice system works.
Okay, so it's basically arm twisting.
Absolutely, it's arm twisting, it's deal making, and most of the charges, if Mr. Naqvi was facing a trial in the UK, which he said he would be happy to do, it would be a civil trial, not a criminal one. And if he lost, he might well spend a short period of time in jail and have to pay fines. But in the US, it's a criminal trial, and as he has not done a deal, he's the only one now still saying, look, I'm innocent of these charges. He's refusing to play the game of the US justice.
And why is that?
To go quiet.
When he knows he can get out of it?
Well, he can't necessarily get out. He's not necessarily going to win. He could be extradited from the UK. The UK-US extradition treaty is an abomination. Virtually no US citizens, even one woman who killed a young man in her car and was spirited away to the US, she has not been extradited to face charges in the UK. But literally hundreds of Brits and international citizens in the UK have been extradited the other way. So he's in severe danger, actually, of being extradited to the US, and he could end up, potentially, in the same prison that Jeffrey Epstein was in when he committed suicide in Manhattan.
Right. And coming back to your book, what do you think is the fate of the book? Is it going to become a bestseller or not?
Well, obviously I hope so. But we've got the odds stacked against us. We've got a very small, wonderful publisher, Biteback Publishers, and we're facing HarperCollins and Penguin. We can send our book out to ask to have it reviewed, but the other side own a large chunk of the UK and US media. So, you know, it is David and Goliath. We'll do our best. Obviously, I believe my book is objective and based on evidence.
In the
and
end,
so
you
I think,
you may end up only uploading it on the internet.
well, let's try and see if we can sell some
Because
books
I don't
first.
think you'll be allowed to sell freely in many countries where you expect to sell, to be honest.
Well, I think the most important thing is that these issues are raised and that we have a debate about the way in which an individual can be tried and condemned in the media, the way in which the Department of Justice can leak information, leak the prosecution case, and this chap is left only with a silence. The only defense he can offer, his lawyers are advising him not to say anything. Let's have that debate. Let's have that debate about impact investing. Let's have that debate about the US opposing the sale of Karachi Electric. And if I can generate some of that debate, then I'll be very happy. And if we sell some books as well, then that will be marvelous.
Excellent. What we can do is on our part, because I mean, he is a Pakistani, we can actually have, focus groups, including you and some other people from the Pakistan. People who matter, people who have an opinion, and people whose statements carry weight. We can have them on board, and then let's see what they have to say about the book. Is that all right? Does that
Absolutely.
sound?
That would be very, very kind of you. And I think there are some interesting issues that we could air.
I think the people have a right to know the truth, and our quest is to find the truth, not to be this way or that way, but to go and investigate the absolute truth, nothing but truth.
And have both sides of the argument put.
Yeah.
That's all I'm saying, really.
Brian Brivati, thank you very much for being with us today, and we hope to have you soon with us, with a group of other people, and let's see how it takes up from there. Meanwhile, good luck with your book, and good luck with your record sales of the book, and let me know when that happens. You take care. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your time.
आप सुन रहे थे ब्रायन की बातें, और वो इस वक्त बता रहे थे कि क्या उनके ख्याल में आरिफ नकवी के साथ ज़्यादतियाँ हो रही हैं। उनका ख्याल है कि उनको फ्रेम किया जा रहा है और उनकी प्रोसिक्यूशन जो है वो अनफेयर है। ये उनका ओपिनियन है, वो क्यों दे रहे हैं आपने सुन लिया। इस चैनल पे अपनी राय ज़रूर दीजिएगा कमेंट्स के अंदर कि आपका क्या ख्याल है, क्या हो रहा है। क्या इसी तरह है कि अमेरिका एक पाकिस्तानी को चार्ज कर रहा है क्योंकि उसने चाइना के साथ डील की, या कोई और वजह भी हो सकती है। इस चैनल को सब्सक्राइब करना मत भूलिएगा, बेल आइकॉन को प्रेस करें। अल्लाह हाफ़िज़।